The fire started in the night, near the Circus Maximus. Dry timbers caught fast, and by morning half the city was flame. People fled through smoke-filled alleys, dragging children, screaming prayers. Nero wasn't seen. Rumours whispered he watched from a tower, singing of Troy's fall. When the flames died, Rome was ash, but the emperor was ready, with plans for a new palace and a scapegoat. The Christians. Temples burned, innocents died, and the line between ruler and arsonist blurred. This is the story of Nero, not the monster of legend, but the man behind the fire that nearly consumed an empire. Embark on a journey into the heart of ancient Rome, where ambition and power coalesced in a deadly dance. In the blood-streaked halls of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, we find Nero, perhaps Rome's most infamous ruler. He was not merely a figure from history, but the culmination of ambition, intrigue, and a ceaseless quest for power. At just 16, Nero ascended to the throne, a testament to a saga rich with betrayal, manipulation, and murder. Power was the currency of this realm, and Nero, with a lineage overflowing with ruthless tacticians, knew its price. At the centre of Nero's rise is his mother, Agrippina the Younger, a master manipulator among political predators. Determined to see her son rule, she steered him to power with an unnerving mixture of affection and calculation. Picture the young emperor, the weight of centuries heavy upon him, the expectations of an empire pressing on his shoulders, as court advisors whispered intently in his ear. The stage was set. The play was deadly serious. Nero's story begins with the Julio-Claudian dynasty, a family of grandeur and infamy. Tracing its roots back to Augustus, Rome's first emperor, Nero was born into a legacy far grander than most could fathom. This family was synonymous with military triumphs and governing brilliance, yet beset by notorious excesses and moral corruption under Rome's unrelenting sun. From an early age, Nero's destiny was entwined with these legends, his blood deemed sacred, his life symbolic of Rome's enduring might. His ancestors, through conquest and counsel, forged an empire unmatched in history. Alongside this legacy lay an atmosphere thick with betrayal, paranoia, and deceit. Agrippina the Younger emerges as a formidable figure. More than a mother, she was a crucial architect of Roman politics. Born to privilege and peril, as the daughter of Germanicus and sister of Caligula, Agrippina learned survival through the chaotic rise and fall of her kin. Her intelligence and ambition, coupled with her relentless drive, made her a dominant force in history. She married her uncle, Emperor Claudius, in a chilling political pact to secure her son's accession. The corridors of Roman power were labyrinthine, marked by alliances and betrayals. Agrippina's marriage bought her time and influence, positioning Nero for the imperial succession. She adeptly won over supporters, diminished adversaries, and deftly erased barriers between Nero and the throne. Her strategies were at once brilliant and terrifying. Within this fraught environment, trust was a scarce commodity, even among closest allies. Agrippina's gambit, a single misstep could have spelled disaster, was a high-stakes game. The transition from Claudius to Nero reveals one of Rome's darker chapters, the notorious act of assassination shrouded in secrecy. Chroniclers speculate that Agrippina, consumed by ambition, poisoned Claudius to hasten Nero's rise, a chillingly bold move. It was a world where feasts were treacherous and delicacies masked deadly poisons. Claudius, unsuspecting, succumbed to poison, triggering a transformation that reshaped Rome. With Claudius's demise, Nero became emperor at an age when identities are still forming. His coronation was more than a protocol. It was an epoch-defining moment. As he assumed control, the empire braced for a new era. Agrippina stood with the laurels of her triumph, her son embodying Rome's continuity. Yet questions of capability loomed over Nero's ascent. The young ruler a figure of hope and skepticism, emblematic of an empire's future. Upon Nero's enthronement, Agrippina wielded unparalleled influence. Never before had a Roman woman's power been so overt. Dictating policy and shaping the course of governance, she was a constant in Nero's burgeoning empire. Her dominion, however, came with tension. She cast a shadow over Nero, once a mother's pride, now straining at his bonds. Her ever-watchful presence stifled him, brewing within him a rebellion against the very blood that raised him. The Senate felt the pressure of this maternal ambition, the senators watching Agrippina and Nero's tense dance. Tradition dictated the emperor's primacy, yet Agrippina's influence muddied these waters. While Nero navigated his reign with public games and festivals, the senators watched, cautious, as mother and son vied for dominance. Nero's mentors, especially Seneca, played crucial roles trying to shape him into a philosopher king. Seneca's wisdom clashed with Nero's evolving desires, veering between stoicism and indulgence. As Agrippina's overreach dulled Nero's autonomy, Seneca stepped in, boosting the young emperor's voice. The court was a battleground of competing intellectual and political interests. In this environment, alive with ambition, wisdom was often but a pawn. Tensions rose between Nero and his mother as he sought independence. Craving true power, he maneuvered around challenges tied to Agrippina. The struggle for autonomy was fierce, echoing through the ranks of those loyal to his mother. Nero, now seeking allies, plotted his course, driven by a desire for sovereignty. As his reign unfolded, Rome held its breath. Beneath the surface, a storm brewed. Nero and Agrippina's confrontation was inevitable, a crisis born from ambition that threatened Rome's traditions. On the cusp of transformation, amid an empire teetering on change, whispers of a destiny difficult to silence haunted the young emperor's path. In the bustling heart of Rome, young Nero was presented not merely as an emperor, but as a glimmer of hope for stability. At just 16, adorned in the imperial diadem, he stood in the shadow of Rome's grandeur, enveloped by the ambitions of his mother, Agrippina the Younger. Her schemes had placed him on the throne, and beneath the royal purple he wore, Nero was a figure of inexperience, shielded by tales of past emperors who had tread the same path. The celebrations that marked his ascent overflowed with wine and the hope of the plebeians, but Agrippina was the puppeteer behind this facade, her influence casting long shadows over his nascent reign. In quieter corners of this imperial tale was Seneca, the philosopher and stoic, tasked with moulding the young emperor. Among scrolls and the aroma of aging parchment, Seneca sought to impart wisdom and guide Nero towards a just leadership. Through him, Nero's potential was nurtured, the exchange of knowledge more than mere instruction. Yet, Seneca's teachings clashed with the greater forces at play. Agrippina's iron grip remained firm, a constant foil to his philosophy, entwining Nero's courtly education with a web of power and control. Nero's early reform, painted with theatrical zeal, marked his reign with a twist of culture and creativity. The thriving Roman Forum saw the effects of policies aimed at brushing humanity onto the empire's canvas. Here, theatre symbolised this ambition, with Nero himself performing, his golden voice telling stories across the Colosseum. These acts, more than mere entertainment, were attempts to bridge the gap between ruler and ruled. Yet skepticism simmered, particularly among the elite, who saw these performances as distractions from the manoeuvring of power in Agrippina's court. The shadows of Nero's rule were lengthened by Agrippina, a figure of awe and suspicion alike. Her influence was vast and interwoven with his own, like vines constricting an ancient tree. Her history of cunning persistence underscored Nero's every public act and private thought. Though she presented herself as his protector, it was her vision that truly guided the empire's course, driving her to manipulate the political landscape. Nero's attempts to depict himself as a sovereign leader eclipsed under her looming presence, while seeds of rebellion slowly took root beneath his polished exterior. Within the opulence of Rome, Nero quietly wrestled against his gilded cage. The velvet control of Agrippina weighed heavily on his creative spirit, fueling his descent into brooding reflection. Alone in his chambers, resentment simmered, born of the dichotomy between his ambitions and the enforced reality of his mother's domination. His solace lay in the arts, a canvas free from her interference, where the whispers of independence could take form. And yet, even these diversions did little to placate his internal strife, a festering discontent biding its time for resolution. Beneath his public generosity, Nero worked to secure the favour of the common people, orchestrating grand spectacles, distributing food, and showcasing an altruistic ruler seemingly touched by compassion. This generosity, however, harboured ulterior motives. Each act was calculated to carve out a loyal power base to counterbalance his mother's influence. But the applause of the masses also served as a reminder of the perils of defying Agrippina, a complex interplay between gratitude and fear tightening around the young emperor. As ambitions within Nero grew, so too did the tension with Seneca, whose guidance started to falter against the tide of Nero's willful defiance. Their conversations, once rich with philosophical depth, now betrayed an undertone of conflict. Seneca's cautionary counsel fell on ears tuned to the beats of burgeoning autonomy, marking a divide in their shared pursuit of an idealistic empire. The alignment between the philosopher's teachings and Nero's imperial objectives began to crumble, overshadowed by the allure of unchecked power gnawing at the empire's integrity. Amid this tension, the tenuous alliance binding Nero, Agrippina, and Seneca began to fray. Their visions for Rome, sharply divergent, jostled for supremacy. What appeared as harmony in the polished corridors of power concealed a battleground of divergent ambitions. Nero, trapped within this elaborate dance, was burdened by the fraught union's restrictions, caught between compliance and conviction. Each party's aspirations, clashing beneath an imposed veneer of stability, threatened to unravel the empire's fragile peace, hinting at an ominous transformation. The empire watched as fractures crept into this delicate arrangement, threatening to reveal the unresolved tensions boiling underneath. Nero faced a dilemma, one mirroring the choices between loyalty to his mother and forging his own path. In the quiet corridors of power, the pressure mounted, and Nero's transformation loomed. It was a dawn forewarning more than just an upheaval in leadership, but the stunning metamorphosis of a young emperor about to step into his contentious legacy, guided by complexity that would soon echo through the ages. Beneath the towering statues and marble carvings of ancient Rome, a dangerous thread of maternal ambition wove itself into the fabric of an empire. Agrippina the Younger, fierce and cunning, stood at its centre. As a prominent member of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, she understood the labyrinthine politics that defined Roman power. Her greatest triumph was placing her son, Nero, upon the throne, a move that left historians in awe and sparked whispers of ambition and coercion. From the beginning, Agrippina reigned not through duels or conquests, but through manipulation and control, her influence wrapping itself tightly around Nero. Rome's imperial heir was moulded within the contours of his mother's relentless will. But as the young emperor matured, so did his desire for autonomy. For Nero, the transition to power was not merely a coronation. It was a fierce struggle against the expectations and dominion set by the woman who placed him on history's stage. By the time whispers of Agrippina's interference reached Nero's ears, his resentment had set the stage for a staggering act of betrayal. The emperor, who was destined to be the divine sovereign, found himself ensnared by invisible bonds, yearning for a liberation that would come at a tremendous cost. In his labyrinthine mind, Nero plotted a spectacular deceit, a collapsible boat meant to eliminate his mother under the guise of reconciliation. The plan was drenched in irony, for the emperor, once the symbol of Roman promise, was now engineering a mechanical monstrosity aimed at his flesh and blood. But the gods spared Agrippina, her near-miraculous escape mocking Nero's diabolical invention. Her survival became a whispering storm across Rome, a marvel entwined with ghastly intentions, as commoners and nobles alike speculated on the depths of imperial treachery. Stymied and driven deeper into paranoia, Nero turned to the chilling finality of direct assassination. He dispatched assassins to ensure his mother's silencing, a macabre reflection of a terrifying intertwining of desperation and madness. Agrippina's murder retched through Rome, a chorus of shock rippling through the city's heart. In this act, the world witnessed an emperor willing to cross even the most unforgiving lines to assert his independence. Yet his feigned grief, a grandiose eulogy at his mother's funeral, rang hollow in ears attuned to the emperor's duplicity. Rome's alleys teemed with the murmurs of this ultimate betrayal, painting Nero both mad and monstrous. This act of matricide was an earthquake that split Nero's psyche. The aftermath, tangled with madness, haunted the emperor with ghosts and shadows as palpable as Rome's banyan trees. Isolation grew within Nero's court, where once loyal advisors fled or fell to whispered accusations of sedition. With every execution, paranoia tightened its grasp, leading to a reign fueled by fear, mistrust, and unchecked ambition. Recollections of Agrippina's nagging shadow and the visceral reality of her death left Nero teetering on the brink of reason, his empire a reflection of his fractured mind. The Roman populace, meanwhile, traversed the everyday against a backdrop of growing chaos. Unique in their era, they observed an emperor who was both larger than life and trampled by the weight of his actions. The streets of Rome transformed into arenas of speculation as ordinary citizens contemplated their rulers' unraveling. The crime of matricide loomed impossibly large, not just as a historical scandal, but as a distorted reflection of Nero's ruling doctrine, a doctrine racked by guilt and scarred by a desperate need for absolution through grandeur. Yet Nero, unburdened by his mother's constraints, surrendered to new obsessions. Artistic ambition replaced republican governance as Nero draped himself with accolades meant for poets and performers, intermingling politics with theatre. The emperor revelled in unprecedented artistic endeavours, his court a messy collage of spectacles and sycophancy that further fuelled his isolation. Each grand display disguised the unravelling beneath, An emperor's delusion hid beneath the thundering applause of coerced admirers. Nero's artistic indulgence, however, could not fully veil the ironies of his imperial proclamations, laws that promised stability yet masked chaos. These were actions of an emperor balancing on the knife edge of conscience and control, his regime a dissonant symphony of order and disorder. For all his declarations, Nero could not escape the psychological tempest born of his grave transgression. His legacy, one that he strove so desperately to secure, was inexorably tied to his infamy. As whispers of revolt drifted through the Senate halls, a prelude to the discontent fermenting in the empire's farthest provinces, Nero's solitude burgeoned. The empire he sought to define was, in reality, a stage for unbearable tragedies. None more poignant than the silence that followed the act meant to cement his autonomy. Rome seemingly braced itself for an impending storm, the city itself a stage for its emperor's implosion. Nero's reign, heavy with irony and haunted by the spectre of his mother's murder, edged Rome ever closer to an engulfing darkness, leaving an indelible mark on history and whispers of his name echoing through time. In the grand tapestry of Roman rulers, Nero was a decidedly different thread, woven with both ambition and artistic passion. As others before him inscribed their legacies on the battlefield or through political machinations, Nero aspired to etch his in the hearts of theatre-goers and those who adored the arts. He did not yearn for the cold respect of the Senate chambers. Instead, he longed for the warm applause of an audience. So began his reign, not merely as a governing force, but as a maestro, orchestrating Rome into a place of spectacle, an idea that thrilled some and appalled others. Through theatre, music, and poetry, Nero sought to transform Rome into a living, breathing tableau of artistic brilliance. His performances were not mere diversions, but formidable expressions of his vision for Rome, a city he wished to entertain and engage. He took the stage with a hunger for acceptance, weaving art with authority. Yet beneath the toga of this performance-driven emperor, unease brewed among the patricians. The Senate, steeped in centuries of stoic governance, found itself at odds with an emperor who seemed more comfortable in the role of an entertainer than a ruler. While Nero courted public adoration through his artistry, he alienated many in the halls of power. The Senate viewed his acts with a mix of skepticism and alarm. Here was a ruler who appeared to trivialize the seriousness of emperorship, swapping the sword for the lyre, daring to erode the solemnity traditionally associated with his position. What the Senate saw as an affront, Nero understood as an opportunity to craft a unique imperial identity, blurring the lines between governance and grandeur. Despite Nero's charm, the aristocrats harboured growing suspicion, fearing his artistic excesses might undermine the very pillars upon which Rome was built. Nero's theatrical approach to reign garnered mixed reactions from the wide array of Romans who filled the city's bustling avenues. Many saw his artistic pursuits as refreshing, an emperor bridging the divine authority of his office with the relatable passion of the arts. Spectators were often found smiling, sharing in the emperor's love for performance, a momentary reprieve from their daily toils. Within this shared spectacle lay an intimacy, a bonding experience between ruler and ruled, as Nero's heart danced upon unseen strings, capturing imaginations across the social spectrum. Yet not every Roman looked upon this embrace of artistry with favour. Detractors murmured of decadence, fearing that Rome's emperor had strayed too close to the cultural excesses that had weakened other powerful empires. Nero's devotion to performance, they whispered, presaged a deeper chaos, a warning of an emperor lost within his own reflections as the empire's debates went unaddressed. This dichotomy of perception painted a complex portrait of Nero's Rome, a place oscillating between cultural enlightenment and disaster. Nero's passion for the arts was encapsulated in his ambitious cultural reforms and the grand spectacles he endorsed. He advocated for increased public spending on festivals and theatres, promoting a world where entertainment became a cornerstone of civic life. By inviting citizens from all walks to partake in this cultural renaissance, Nero aimed to redefine Rome's social fabric. However, behind the curtains of lavish performances lay the unresolved struggles of a city stretched thin by class disparity and governance issues, a stark reminder that appearances could sometimes deceive. The emperor existed at the intersection of art and power, a man caught in the throes of conflicting identities. Emperorship demanded reverence and dominance, yet the artist within him craved applause and connection. Nero's quest to fulfill both roles cast him as a riveting, if enigmatic figure on Rome's stage, the paradox of a ruler striving for immortal fame within the ephemeral splendour of performance. To his admirers he was a visionary, to his critics a harbinger of uncertainty. His theatrical endeavours, however, did not exist in a vacuum. Rome simmered beneath a brew of social tensions, the empire's subjects navigating the pressures of survival, while their emperor cultivated extravagance. Critical voices among Rome's elite saw potential vulnerabilities in Nero's artful distractions, opportunities within his perceived neglect that ambition could exploit. The delicate balance between revered artist and responsible leader became Nero's incessant challenge, as whispers of dissent echoed in the city's stone colonnades. Even as he captivated audiences, Nero deployed symbolic gestures to reflect deeper truths through his performances. Masks he donned served as complex motifs, representations of identity, perception, and power. Through his acts, Nero communicated personal philosophies that invited reflection and introspection among viewers across the empire. Yet this blending of elements begged the question of artistry's place within authority, a question that continued long after his reign drew to a close. Public opinion, the perennial tide shaping leadership legacies, became the final arbiter of Nero's reign. Admirers hailed him as a cultural liberator, courageously breaking chains of convention, while critics viewed his artistic indulgences as signals of decay. Within this labyrinth of perspectives grew a legacy suffused with ambiguity, a testament to the complexities and contradictions threaded through Nero's journey. In an empire spanning oceans and borders, his influence extended, casting shadows of his rule across provinces through emissaries and trade. Stories of the emperor artist reached faraway courts, tinged with fascination and caution. Nero's influence, both feared and revered, bridged nations, instigating debates on leadership and artistry that permeated not just Rome, but the vast tapestry of world history. Through his passions, Nero wove his essence into the soul of Rome, leaving an indelible mark on the empire that heard his song resonate through time. In the heart of Rome, the summer of 64, CE hung heavy with anticipation, a tension woven within the bustling avenues and narrow alleys of the city. The capital roared with life, its streets a labyrinth of bustling markets and towering wooden insulae, crammed with citizens of every class beneath fragile roofs. Though the stone temples and grand baths stood proudly as emblems of Roman engineering, They provided scant reassurance against the city's perennial fear. Fire. Opened flames flickered in taverns and homes, their light casting deceptive shadows in the evening, a constant reminder of the ever-present risk. It was during one such warm July night that disaster struck. A fire ignited near the Circus Maximus, a beloved arena for chariot races where days were filled with cheers and days of laughter. As darkness enveloped Rome, these flames became a nightmarish spectacle, erupting with terrifying speed. Winds fanned the blaze, propelling it through the city's wooden structures like a living beast. Awoken from their slumber, residents stumbled into the chaos, their cries merging with the crackling of flames, creating a symphony of terror. The Vigiles, Rome's firefighting brigade, rushed to the scene, but their rudimentary tools and limited resources left them woefully unprepared. Meanwhile, harrowing scenes of panic unfolded. Families fled, clutching their belongings, attempting deadly dashes through streets where flames gnawed at timbers and trapped the unwary. Those who reached the sanctuary of stone-built temples could only watch, powerless, as the inferno engulfed the city they called home. For 9 relentless days, the fire devoured Rome, reducing markets and homes to ashes, and leaving a smouldering trail across the heart of the empire. The once familiar districts became alien landscapes, the gutted remnants visible from the encircling hills. Refugees, smoke-blackened and wary, flooded outwards, adding to the chaos as neighbourhoods were erased. Yet in this apocalypse, there were moments of heroism. Ordinary Romans linked hands to battle flames, risking their lives in vain attempts to reclaim their city from the clutches of the fire. When the flames finally relented, Rome was a ghost of itself, its vibrant core scarred beyond recognition. 2/3 of the city lay in ruin, including cherished landmarks and teeming tenements, devastating both the landscape and the Roman spirit. The scale of disaster was profound, not just in the physical destruction, but in the unraveling of societal order. Disease loomed over contaminated water supplies, and vast scores of the displaced crowded into makeshift camps, turning an urban catastrophe into a dire humanitarian crisis. Amid these ruins, whispers started to seep through the charred remnants of society. Where had Emperor Nero been throughout this tempest? Stories of his absence during the fire spread like embers, hinting at malice, at a ruler watching from afar. Or worse, orchestrating the destruction to clear space for decadent new constructions. Some claim Nero had sung of Troy's fall as Rome burned, a callous artist in love with tragedy. Though the truth tangled with myth, the claims fed the growing resentment against a ruler known for his eccentricity. In the face of growing outrage, Nero attempted to recast himself as a benevolent leader. He opened his private estates, offering refuge to the displaced, and launched public relief efforts, feeding and funding those in dire need. Despite these gestures, loyalty wavered, and doubt shadowed his every move. Promises of rebuilding a grander city with wide streets and brick insulae were received with skepticism, seen as veiled attempts to glorify himself more than shelter his people. As the city rose from its ashes under Nero's command, these actions reinforced the divide between ruler and citizens, exploiting rather than bridging the gap left by the flames. Indeed, the reconstruction centerpiece, the lavish Domus Aurea, a golden palace heralded for its architectural marvels, stood as a stark reminder to ordinary Romans of opulence crafted upon their suffering and loss. In the aftermath, historical accounts that sought to separate myth from reality found Nero's shadow unavoidable. Chroniclers like Tacitus noted his aid efforts, but painted him largely as an insensitive ruler. Stories of madness and artistic indulgence became the narrative threads of a legend in which governance took a backseat to personal ambition. Modern historians continue to grapple with these narratives, debating the veracity of the tales that shaped Nero's notorious legacy. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence, the fire's mark on history is eternal, its echoes resounding through the corridors of power and the memories of an empire reeling from destruction. Through this fiery trial, amidst the havoc and horror, Rome was reborn. Its streets widened, its construction sturdier, and though Nero's vision for a renewed capital was realised, it did little to quell the bitterness left behind. What had been an opportunity for communal resilience instead revealed disparities entrenched within city life, leaving a legacy of division beneath the polished veneer of renewal. In the history of Rome, the Great Fire becomes not just an episode of destruction, but a chapter that highlighted the deep fissures within civilization and the haunting spectre of unchecked ambition. In the aftermath of the Great Fire of Rome, tales as vivid as the flames themselves began to circulate, painting Nero as a callous ruler, playing his lyre while the city fell into chaos. Whispers among the Roman populace spoke of Nero's fascination with the arts, drawing parallels between his alleged inaction during the Inferno and his passion for dramatic performances. The image of an emperor, lost in the melody of a song about Troy's fall, only added fuel to the gossip, blurring the line between his love for the stage and accusations of negligence. To the Roman people, Nero's theatrical presentations and his penchant for wearing masks while performing were more than mere hobbies. They were symbols of an emperor distracted, perhaps dangerously so, from his duties. His artistic indulgences jarred against traditional Roman notions of leadership, heightening the perception that personal ambition overshadowed his responsibility as a ruler. For some, these notions were only exacerbated by the Great Fire's narrative, creating a tale that resonated with the populace. Historians like Tacitus contributed to this portrayal of Nero. He recounted how the emperor supposedly watched Rome burn from afar, inspired to write a tragic piece about Troy. Yet, inconsistencies abound in Tacitus's story. The fiddle as we know it didn't even exist in Nero's era. It was the lyre, or cithara, he supposedly played. Such discrepancies invite contemplation about whether these accounts were factual or the result of creative embellishment designed to tarnish Nero's image. Suetonius and Cassius Dio too depicted Nero unfavourably, often influenced by the political climates they inhabited. The infamous anecdote of Nero and his instrument might therefore be less about alleged actions and more about crafting a potent story of a decadent emperor during an era of decline. Despite such damning tales, evidence suggests that Nero took active measures to address the crisis. His gardens offered refuge to the destitute, and he purportedly coordinated food distribution to stave off famine. Such relief efforts contradict the widely held image of a disengaged ruler. Perhaps Nero's penchant for grand gestures masked his genuine attempts to help, suggesting a complex and multifaceted reality rather than a simplistic caricature. Post-fire, Nero embarked on sweeping urban renewal efforts, laying the foundation for a Rome less susceptible to future fires. Wide roads and building regulations emerged from the ashes, hinting at a dual motive to not only prevent future calamities but also reshape public favour. Whether these efforts were genuine or strategic, they underscore the intricate tapestry of leadership that Nero navigated during this turbulent time. In examining Nero's legacy, it's crucial to address the biases inherent in the historical accounts. Tacitus and Suetonius, writing long after Nero's death, infused their narratives with retrospective criticisms, crafting stories that entertained as much as informed. Biased historiography reminds us that disentangling fact from prejudice is often an arduous task, particularly when such tales serve broader political or moral purposes. Roman cultural memory held sway long after Nero's death, with stories of his deeds serving as moral and political lessons. Myths such as Nero's performance endured not merely for their intrigue, but because they encapsulated definitive cultural narratives woven into Rome's identity. As such, the legend of Nero amid the flames was both a cultural and cautionary tale, illustrating the power of story as a tool for reflection and critique in any society undergoing change. Historical narratives, while powerful, demand careful scrutiny to distinguish reality from the seductive allure of myth. In Nero's case, reconciling the narrative of his life with cold, hard evidence is essential. Archaeological findings, juxtaposed against literary accounts, facilitate a clearer understanding of his reign. This pursuit, however challenging, seeks to bridge the gap between antiquity's mythologized narratives and the truths they obscure, ultimately painting a richer portrait of the emperor's humanity. Nero's transformation from an emperor to an emblem of dereliction demonstrates the shifting power of narrative over time. His complex legacy, vacillating between villainy and curiosity, thrives in cultural depictions spanning centuries. Through literature, arts, and theatre, he remains not merely a relic of Roman history, but a figure emblematic of the complexities inherent in power, ambition, and artistic fervour. Such tales endure because they resonate deeply with fundamental human experiences, perpetually inviting both critique and fascination. The offerings of sanctuary in Nero's gardens during the fire exemplify this interplay between myth and reality. The gardens served as a refuge, contrasting sharply with the desolation outside, and reflected Nero's intricate balancing act between public perception and personal intent. Through these spaces, Nero's actions straddled the line between genuine humanitarian concern and perceived theatricality, underscoring the nuances of leadership under scrutiny. To grasp Nero fully, it is essential to consider the diverse perspectives of his contemporaries, from the political machinations of the elite to the shifting opinions of the plebeians. The dynamic interplay of admiration and disdain reflects the emperor's profound impact on those around him, a mosaic of conflicting views that history often simplifies to fit narrative arcs. Nero's reign profoundly influenced the political, cultural, and architectural landscapes of Rome. The city's transformation after the fire is a testament to his enduring impact, altering the urban fabric and leaving a legacy far more complex than villainy alone. Such a nuanced understanding of Nero challenges reductive historical portrayals, inviting a deeper exploration of leadership, power, and memory through the ages. In a Rome restless with whispers of betrayal and ruin, the emerging Christian sect seemed stealthy and foreign amid the city's polytheistic grandeur. Christianity, championing a singular god, captured the hearts of Rome's most marginalised, the slaves, the women, and the urban poor, offering them an enclave of hope. Their secret gatherings and enigmatic rituals, like the agape feast and the sacrament of blood and body, perplexed and unnerved the common Roman, cultivating fear of the unknown. This apprehension seeded suspicion. Their refusal to honour traditional Roman deities appeared not as mere spiritual preference, but sedition against the state. When the Great Fire incinerated much of Rome, clutching at its wooden tenements with merciless ferocity, the city clamoured for a villain. Nero, an emperor surrounded by shadows of infamy, found the Christians a convenient target for deflection. His accusation was timely, tapping into ancient fears and converting public trepidation into a baser rage. Nero pointed his imperial finger, casting Christians as arsonists. Soldiers swept through Rome, gathering them into custody, with a fervour echoing a sinister hunt, intensifying the city's collective sigh of relief at their capture. As the Colosseum metamorphosed into a stage of execution, Nero's dark theatre unfolded. The emperor, enamoured with spectacle, orchestrated harrowing displays that made blood sport of human suffering. Cheering crowds witnessed the faithful torn by beasts, or watched in horror as men and women became living torches, illuminating Nero's night festivities. This ghastly form of entertainment was Nero's dire attempt to reinforce order, to bind his empire's fractures with fear. Yet instead of cementing control, these brutal acts began to sow seeds of doubt and sympathy within the hearts of onlookers, gnawing at the edges of his already tenuous reign. Fear coiled itself in the citizens' minds, binding them in a silent allegiance. Nero wielded terror like a sceptre, ensuring his subjects questioned not the state's cruelty, but the strange beliefs of its victims. But this dread, crafted as a temporary seal against chaos, bifurcated Rome's society, dividing it into realms of trust and suspicion. Citizens lay awake at night, eyes cast towards shadowed doorways, fearing the next accusation, the next knock echoing their own fate. As the flames subsided, dust and grief lingering in the air, Nero stood unsteadily between two masks, the saviour of Rome, guardian against subversion, and the tyrant whose whims left citizens uneasy. Imperial propaganda sought to enshrine him as Rome's divine protector, a bulwark against foreign creeds. Coins and monuments flaunted this facade, their engraved images singing praises long rehearsed. Yet, beneath this polished veneer, cracks foretold a harsher truth. The emperor's opulence amidst suffering, the charred remains of Rome juxtaposed with his extravagant banquets, eroded the public's faith. Nero's once entertaining eccentricities turned to defaults of his character, signs of a mind faltering into decay. History remembers these events through lenses clouded by myth and narrative bias. Chronicles like those of Tacitus, written with the passage of time and flavoured by disdain, serve as both witness and anecdote. Tacitus portrays Nero through a web of both fact and fervent condemnation, a ruler delighting in spectacle more than justice. Christian writers too wove these trials into a tapestry of persecution. Nero as the ultimate antagonist, a figure whose cruelty was underscored by his alleged role as the Antichrist, deepening the blend of truth and embellishment. The persecution illuminated a vast gulf between Roman norms and burgeoning Christian ideology. Roman belief centred around pleasing a pantheon to ensure prosperity, contrasting sharply with Christianity's teachings of a singular path to salvation. Each Christian martyr encountered through these times, with their stubborn adherence to their faith, advanced a narrative of fortitude against the empire. Curiously, the oppression steeled Christian resolve, their numbers swelling as new converts joined, drawn by tales of martyrdom and valour echoing through the underground. Despite its intent to stamp out dissent, Nero's brutal repression fostered an unintended legacy of resilience and belief. each execution for faith emboldened the sect's cohesion. Martyrdom transformed into a potent catalyst for spreading their creed. Over time, the same city that once sought to extinguish their presence witnessed their inexorable growth. Christian ideals coursing through its heartlines, silent yet potent counterpoints to Roman orthodoxy. Nero's tactics, though momentarily subduing his detractors, ignited broader societal upheaval. Distrust towards the emperor's regime crumbled alliances, incited covert rebellion, and cast a lasting shadow of skepticism upon state-sanctioned narratives. Beyond the polished propaganda lay unrest, simmering beneath the veneer of Roman unity, a turmoil that, akin to latent embers, awaited a spark. In retrospect, Nero's campaign against the Christians not only delineates an era of tumult, but signals a crossroads in cultural evolution, where the clash of faiths would undulate throughout history's continuum. While his reign is now often cast in the dark hues of villainy, its aftermath revealed an indomitable spirit, where even in the face of persecution, hope flickered, an enduring legacy not to be extinguished by the ashes of history. After the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE, as the smouldering ruins still whispered of loss, Emperor Nero conceived a vision grander than what had been reduced to ashes. Where homes of simple Romans once stood, he imagined a sprawling oasis, Rome reborn, sculpted in his image. This ambition found shape in the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a palace unparalleled in decadence and divine pretension. For Nero, this was not just another architectural undertaking, it was his signature on Rome's skyline, a testament to a ruler poised between godly aspiration and the mortal realm. As the populace grappled with the devastation around them, Nero's mind was fixed on transforming his vision into a shimmering reality, a new Rome with him at its epicenter. The construction of the Domus Aurea widened the gulf between the emperor and his subjects. While displaced Romans wandered through debris and sought shelter, Nero lavished his energies and resources on creating a celestial retreat. His grand design stretched across a vast expanse of what was once densely urban land. Landscaped gardens unfolded, artificial lakes mirrored the heavens, and vineyards stretched under the now open sky. This palace was the emperor's Eden, where earthly concerns paled against the luminescence of luxury. Yet, as opulence grew, so too did the silent resentment among the citizens. The Domus Aurea encroached upon the lives of the very people who deemed it an obscene display of unbridled power and divine delusion. Within its walls, the ingenuity of the age came to life. Architects Severus and Sylla envisioned more than mere structures. They devised spaces that defied tradition and expectation. The octagonal room, with its fabric of rotating skies, spoke of Nero's desire to walk among the stars, to live as if in dialogue with the cosmos. Here mythos and fate coalesced, whispering of Nero's certainty in a fateful destiny. Remarkable frescoes by the artist Fabulus painted these walls with stories and colours too vivid for ordinary life, while glittering mosaics beneath one's feet depicted gods in surreal allegory. Precious stones and gold leaf adorned the interiors, showcasing wealth beyond the reach of all but their emperor. It wasn't mere decoration, but a statement. The emperor was both ruler and artist, sculptor of a realm that transcended earthly toil. Yet Rome murmured with darkened spirits, increasingly aware of the human and economic toll. Nero's dreams were birthed by the hands of thousands, toiling slaves and workers whose sweat and suffering rarely surfaced in public consciousness. Their blood and effort laid the foundation for this imperial oasis, while Rome's remaining families confronted displacement and despair. As Rome's economy groaned under the weight of endless gleaming corridors and reflecting pools, the divide between emperor and everyman became a chasm. While his people weathered this storm, Nero revelled in indulgence. The Domus Aurea was suited for celebration as much as residence. Nero's banquets were opulent theatre. The heavens watched as his guests dined under his golden gaze, as if scripted by Olympus itself. Music and art filled the grand chambers, as Nero's artistic passions found their stage, leaving the world beyond to fester in unmet need. Here within his personal paradise, he crafted a narrative where he was hero, host, and god. A world woven by the performative grace and grandeur of a single man. The economy's backbone strained beneath the weight of Nero's whims. Resources routinely diverted to feed architectural ambition left the populace with little respite. Glorious marble and rare stones meant for his palace drew funds from Rome's revival. Merchants and tradesmen, integral to rejuvenated commerce, faced familiar streets now shadowed by imperial splendour. Economic shockwaves rippled outward, a testament to a sovereign's infatuation with his reflection rather than his realm's welfare. With Nero's demise, efforts to erase his legacy engulfed the Domus Aurea. Successors buried and repurposed its splendour to distance themselves from its opulent infamy. A tyrant's symbol turned into pragmatic spaces. Yet, the echo of Nero's audacious endeavour endured, whispered through art and literature, stoking centuries of imagination. Renaissance rediscovery unveiled its hidden opulence, and grand artistic minds like Raphael and Michelangelo found inspiration. Thus, the palace that once epitomised overindulgence transformed into a repository of cultural growth, serving as a muse for generations, unimagined by its creator. Archaeologically unearthed, the Domus Aurea unveiled layers of understanding beneath its gilded remains. Its rebirth illuminated Roman architectural genius, presenting a dialogue between past impression and present inquiry. As explorers ventured through its chambers, the complexity of Nero's empire re-emerged, intertwined with stories of power, ambition, and loss, a pale visage of aspirations untethered by cost or consequence. The saga of the Domus Aurea invites reflection on what remains when ambition outpaces sensibility. Its story speaks to the remnants of greatness, crafted from ambition's ashes, later serving as caution or inspiration. Today, as we reimagine the tapestry of this palace, its narrative remains alive within us, a contemplative thread mingling history's weight with a ceaseless quest for immortality in stone and story alike. Under the blazing Italian sun, the illusion of Nero's grandiosity slowly unravelled. The rhythmic pulse of Rome was disrupted, and the whispers of discontent echoed through the cobbled streets and gilded halls. Nero's love for arts and indulgence drained the empire's coffers, leaving citizens to grapple with increased taxes amid the ruins of the Great Fire. His once admired charm now felt like a choking guise. Ordinary Romans and weary senators alike began to sense the fraying seams of the emperor's control. This atmosphere of suspicion seeped through Rome, entwining itself around governors far from the city. These weary pillars of imperial strength, now mere marionettes to Nero's irrational whims, found their loyalty tested with each decree demanding even more resources from strained provinces. The empire stood at the brink, a cauldron of simmering unrest waiting to erupt. It wasn't long before the murmur of rebellion turned into a tide of defiance led by an unlikely figure. This rising tide found its voice in Servius Sulpicius Galba, a venerable senator and respected governor, known for his military acumen and administrative honesty. Despite his advancing years, Galba's disdain for Nero's rule swelled, echoing through the whispers of Rome and into the ears of others dissatisfied with Nero's excesses. Loyalists in the Senate and the military urged him on, eager to rally under his banner of renewal and stability. The provinces, fatigued by relentless demands and mismanagement, began to see Galba as a beacon of hope, a leader promising to restore the dignity of Roman governance. From Gaul to Spain, cries of revolt rang out, urged by the promise of liberation from Nero's suffocating grip. Meanwhile, a storm brewed within the heart of the empire itself. The Praetorian Guard, Nero's private protectors and defenders of his reign, shifted uneasily. The privileges they once enjoyed under Nero weighed against the reality of his detachment and the empire's faltering state. Seduced by Galba's promises of reform and stability, these protectors turned conspirators, their loyalty swayed by gold and visions of a better Rome. The fortress that Nero relied upon for protection crumbled from within, shadows of betrayal drawing ever closer. Caught in the echo of these conspiracies, Nero remained ensconced in the lavish embrace of the Domus Aurea, pursuing his artistic fancies while neglecting rumblings of rebellion. His world shrunk to the palatial surroundings and theatrical displays. Nero stood as an emperor clad in denial. Courtiers who once flocked to him withdrew their flattery, seeking safer grounds. In lonely splendour, he indulged the vision of himself as a divine artist, while the Senate mocked his dwindling power. Faced with mounting insurrection, Nero endeavoured to flee the growing threat. Under the cover of night, he slipped away from Rome like a shadow, a fugitive emperor clothed in anonymity, pursued by the very spectres of his ambition. The citizens who had once shouted his praises now only search for his downfall. Nero's frantic flight became a symbol of his decline. The illusion of imperial might disintegrated to a mere whispered echo, haunting Rome's boulevards. With desperation, Nero knocked on doors that had once opened without question. Former allies looked upon him with cold eyes, fear of the rising tide aligning them with Galba. Abandonment tightened its grip on Nero. The walls of trust he built now caved under the weight of crumbling alliances. Those once considered friends sailed away on the shifting tides of political necessity and self-preservation, leaving Nero to drift alone in the tempest. In his final refuge, desperation etched upon his brow. Nero vainly sought clemency, an appeal to the traditions of Rome's forgiving nature. Yet the echoes of vengeance left no room for pardon. The emperor, who once controlled the fate of others, found himself shackled by history's unyielding grasp. As he stood at the precipice, Nero realised that his aspirations of grandeur and dreams of artistic immortality were lost amidst the ruins of his life. Standing on the edge of capture, the weight of fate bore down on Nero. Torn between panic and resignation, he sculpted his final words, reputedly exclaiming, "What an artist dies in me!" This lament echoed through time, emblematic of an emperor who had lived within tension between illusion and reality. In that last tragic act, ambition and artistry unravelled, casting Nero as a cautionary figure within the annals of Rome. In the wake of his demise, Nero's legacy lingered, a silhouette upon Rome's turbulent horizon. His narrative, etched with artistry and excess, became a spectral reminder amid Rome's decaying grandeur. As thoughts turned to stability, Nero's shadow stretched across time, his reign debated by historians, and his influence echoing through the arts. In reflecting upon Nero, modern culture glimpses how ambition and folly dance upon the fragile strings of power. Even now his presence haunts the collective memory, an eternal echo of empire at the brink. Nero's reign of power, at one time filled with youthful promise and artistic zeal, collapsed under the weight of his own missteps, leaving behind a tangled legacy of both loathing and intrigue. What emerges is a tale as complex as the man himself, a ruler whose life was marked by betrayal, rebellion, and moments of self-indulgence that spiraled into legend. Over centuries, the enigma of Nero has imprinted on our cultural memory, painted vividly by chroniclers and historians, though each account remains clouded by bias and time. Born into the notorious Julio-Claudian dynasty, he was shaped by political machinations and maternal ambitions, especially those of his mother, Agrippina. Was Nero truly the monster history remembers, or merely a man caught in circumstances he could not control, manipulated by those who stood around him? Many historical accounts, frequently written by authors like Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio, paint Nero in dark hues. These narratives often highlight his tyranny, decadence, and despotism, though their accuracy is questioned. Much of what we know was penned long after his death, influenced by political enemies and the need for subsequent rulers to distance themselves from the Julio-Claudian lineage. As layers of these ancient texts are peeled back, we are left to question how much of Nero's image is rooted in reality, and how much is the product of historical storytelling. In exploring Nero's artistic passions, one finds a ruler with desires quite atypical for an emperor of Rome. His love for the arts extended beyond mere appreciation. He longed to be a participant. His theatrical and musical performances were often ridiculed by Rome's senatorial class, who saw them as beneath an emperor's dignity. Yet, through a modern lens, Nero's activities might be seen less as megalomania and more as a progressive vision, an effort to weave culture into the fabric of Rome's imperial leadership. Nero envisioned his reign not just as a period of rule, but as a cultural renaissance. But these inclinations were often overshadowed by conspiracies and disdain from the elite. Domestically, Nero's policies aimed to enhance the public welfare, including infrastructure improvements and public welfare systems, revealing genuine concern for Rome's prosperity. His initiatives aimed to stabilise a city strained under economic challenges and food shortages, suggesting that his early years as emperor were marked by reform and potential for progress. However, these efforts became lost amidst personal scandals and claims of misrule. His attempts at innovating within the traditional structures of Roman governance have been long overshadowed by his personal failings and stories of excess. Yet amidst this complexity, Nero became a convenient scapegoat for Rome's misfortunes, particularly after the Great Fire. Vilified in his lifetime and afterward, his image was manipulated by succeeding emperors and chroniclers, casting him as a villain to legitimize new regimes and cleanse Rome of its troubled recent past. This trend is not uncommon in history. Nero's story illustrates how political narratives can transform leaders into symbols of societal failures, distorting their true character. Even in death, Nero's influence lingered across centuries, embedded in cultural representations that depict him as the archetype of reckless tyranny. From the opera stage to historical novels, Nero fascinates as both despot and misunderstood visionary, a character set against the dramatic backdrop of ancient Rome's splendour and depravity. His name has become synonymous with calamitous leadership, signifying an eerie warning in times of political or cultural crisis. Nero's tumultuous reign foreshadowed Rome's own struggles with leadership and stability. His psychological journey, marked by childhood manipulation and constant fear of conspiracy, illustrates the burden of power thrust upon a young ruler unprepared for its demands. As paranoia gripped him, Nero's actions became desperate attempts to mould both his legacy and his destiny, from building the opulent Domus Aurea to vilifying Christians for the fire that consumed Rome. Later interpretations and retellings continue to engage with Nero's legacy, complicating the image of a mere tyrant by exploring his depth and humanity. Contemporary historians re-examine Nero from varying angles, using archaeological insights to challenge age-old biases. These reframings echo across films and literature, which grapple with the ambiguities of his rule, questioning the nature of power itself. Beyond his notorious deeds, Nero's reign prompts reflections on the nature of imperium and human ambition. His tale is a lesson on how individual failings can echo through history, a cautionary reflection on authority's potential for both creation and destruction. As we come to the end of this tale spun under the stars, we are reminded that history is as much about those who document it as those who lived it. Consider subscribing to our channel for more journeys into the depths of history and the fascinating stories that continue to shape our world.